one of my favorite factions in all of Warhammer 40K is the Adeptus Mechanicus. It's unique within the Imperium of Man for its autonomy to the rest of humanity, but it also plays a vital role in fueling the war machine that is the Imperium of Man. And at the core of supplying these war resources are Forge Worlds, and that's today's topic in another deep dive video as we explore not just what a Forge World is, but I give you examples of some of the major Forge Worlds of the entire Imperium of Man.
Unlike the other planets ruled over by the Imperium of Man, Forge Worlds are the domain of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Different in so many ways, the Admech exists as a part of humanity while simultaneously being something completely unique, both culturally and militaristically. These planets are superpowers, not just within the Imperial space, but also the entire galaxy. Think of every single Forge World we will talk about today as extensions of the Red Planet. These worlds have the power to rule over and defend entire sectors and still have enough resources to send out military help all across the galaxy. Attaining such an incredible position in the grand scheme of things is no easy task, and as we cover the lore of the major Forge Worlds, we will be learning about how many trials and tribulations each Forge World had to go through in order to obtain control. Now let's kick things off with the main Forge World, the Forge World of Mars. Greatest amongst the Forge Worlds of the Adeptus Mechanicus is the planet of Mars, the Red Planet. Situated in the Sol system, it is the birthplace of the Cult Mechanicus and the seat of its highest power. Mars is the fulcrum upon which the religious, political, and military might of the Tech Priest turns, its importance to the Imperium second only to its sister world of Holy Terra. Mars is the original Forge World. It is a planet given over in ages past to holy industry on an unprecedented scale. Ancient hollow reliquaries paint a picture of an isolated and terrifying era. Long before the Imperium, civil wars and unnamed disasters left Mars an irradiated wasteland, its frigid and toxic atmosphere unbreathable. A surviving culture underground relied heavily upon the remaining technology, so much so that its use and maintenance became ritualistic. Technology became synonymous with life, and their machine god with human survival. On Mars' surface, rust-red deserts of metal particles blow alongside the fringes of vast secretions of soot and chemical-strained metropolises that encompass entire tectonic plates. Crackling capacitor banks the size of cities churn the thick and spoiled atmosphere, creating localized storms so persistent that they gain their own names. Pollutants billow out from mile-high stacks emblazoned with technoglyphs and emitters that blare binary canticles in the praise of the Omnissiah. The ceaseless din of divine creation reverberates through the ground while plumes of cinder and spark gush from the huge volcano-like vents. This is the perfection created by the Adeptus Mechanicus, and Mars' preeminence has seen its likeness remade in praiseworthy imitation time and time again across the galaxy. The Tech Priests throughout the Imperium are referred to collectively as the Priesthood of Mars, such is the planet's central role in their religion and internal politics. It is considered the holiest place of pilgrimage for the adepts of the Cult Mechanicus, who are moved to rapture by the solar collective fields of Arcadia, their optics clicking furiously at the spiral glory of Tantalus Hive and the rearing majesty of Olympus Mon, wherein resides the Fabricator General of Mars. As political and religious ruler of the Red Planet, the Fabricator General is ex officio head of the Adeptus Mechanicus and holds a permanent position as one of the High Lords of Terra. It's important to note that all Forge Worlds owe nominal fealty to Mars, and its ruler is vested with a divine right over all others, judging on matters of doctrine and legitimizing connective articles of trade. Few, however, slavishly submit to the Red Planet's superiority. Discoveries of ancient techno-arcana are often hidden rather than revealed to the Martian eyes. Schisms in theology and competition for resources can mar relationships for centuries, and on occasions small wars have even broken out between the different Forge Worlds. And Mars itself isn't homogeneous. Subsectors conduct treacherous research or plot for power, hacking rival power cells, annexing territory, or appropriating assets. Most Forge Worlds, though, solemnly respect the Red Planet's historical primacy. Many include the elements of their livery and their own attire as a tactic recognition of their power, whether genuinely felt or not, and Mars is viewed as speaking with the authority of the machine god. Thus, its Fabricator General is well versed in the complex and aggressive factionalized interest, making their position on the Council of the High Lords relatively secure against assassination, coercion, and deception. Surrounding Mars and incorporating the moon of Phobos is a circlet of interlinked dockyards, orbital transfer hubs, atmospheric scrubbers, and toxic refineries too dangerous even to allow on the Red Planet's abused surface. Comprising of many other installations including survey outposts and formidable defense platforms, this ring of iron is most notable for the huge warships and other large starfaring constructs that are built alongside its length in gigantic suspended docks. Mars does what most Forge Worlds do and maintains its own Skitarii forces to protect its interests, annihilating the enemies of the Tech Priest and to fight as the vanguard of the quest for knowledge. These obedient warriors create a constant buzz of static psalms. These are holy rites to the Omnissiah as they march forward. The Red Planet counts among its empire more subservient industrial worlds and forge moons than any of its peers. The great trail of machinery, ammunition, and technological wonders flow between its holdings. Now let's move on to one of my favorite Forge Worlds, Forge World Metallica. The gleaming giant of the Ultima Segmentum is the Forge World of Metallica. Metallica is a planet sheathed entirely in adamantium, iron, and steel. Its surface is covered with immense interconnected industrial clusters and forge shrines interspersed with landscapes of industrial waste. It is an unsleeping crucible of war production, whose polluted skies ring to the endless clamor of manufacturing. This piston-driven planet is the industrial heart of the Caradon sector, in a region located close to the ever-expanding Orc Empire of the Arc Arsonist, and also now the raging fury of the Great Rift. The role of this world could not be more pivotal. Metallica's endless production quotas see dozens of war fronts kept supplied with arms and armor. Meanwhile, its renowned macroclads of Skitarii and cohort cyberneticas deploy with machine-like efficiency to crush threats both piratical and heretical throughout the entire region. Such is the Metallican fervor for optimized industrial production and their worship of mechanical sterility over organic impurity that the Forge World has been scoured of all native flora and fauna. Yet to think that the planet is lifeless would be a complete error. From pole to pole, Metallica seethes with indentured labor, dead-eye servitors, and conclaves of tech priests avidly overseeing the production of yet more terrifying war engines and deadly weapons ready to fight in the Omnissiah's name. The cacophony of thundering pistons, roaring genitorums, clattering assembly lines, and endless binaric plane songs roll across the entire artificial landscape like sonic tidal waves. To the Metallican faithful, this endless industrial din is inspiring to the point of being transcendental, for it is the sound of their world, worshipping the Omnissiah through deeds and output both. They even ensure that it is echoed in the purposefully amplified blare of the weaponry and machine they employ. Thus every volley of fire or crushing armored advance is a prayer to the machine god. Metallica stands proudly apart from Mars, both physically and doctrinally. The Metallican priesthood have long resisted any Martian attempts to impose remote rule. Thus their Skitarii display only the barest amount of crimson within their heraldry, a grudging nod to the red planet that is all but drowned out amidst the white of Metallica. This color is symbolic to the Metallicans, as it represents the purity of the machine and its inevitable victory over the weak organics. This strive for purity has been tested as never before in recent times, as Metallica has been assaulted by a Chaos invasion led by the Death Guard Traitor Legion. These forces of Chaos poured filth into the Caradon sector. The Forge World was able to launch counter-offensives in scores of systems, calculating its own borders to be secure. Yet the traitor's power was not so easily held at bay. When the Metallica system was attacked, its Quarry World of Planetas saw fierce fighting. Labor revolts and agitation amongst Metallica's million-strong indentured workforce, particularly on this Quarry World, had been rising as the Forge World's Fabricator General had dispersed the system's resources to defend the wider subsector. Nevertheless, this Quarry World's Skitarii garrison had been bolstered to enforce and maintain the production quotas amongst the serf clans. Quantities of rare metals, magnesium ores, and ferromite once more flowed, yet it was a temporary reprieve. After some months, Metallica's high command suddenly received disturbing reports from more than a dozen mining operations on the Quarry World. In mere days, heretical cults had revealed themselves, servitor units had malfunctioned, and some form of transmechanical corruption had spread to some of the mammoth mining engines that now altered course and headed for the subterranean forge complexes. Metallica rushed entire cohorts of Skitarii to the side alongside macro transports laden with giant, disruptive engines of the Centurio Ordinatus. After 3 days, rampant electroviruses and madness that bloomed across the planet's surface, from the central hub of Crater Valley to the astropathic relays of Hypaea Mons. These maladies advanced in quickening waves until at the height they coincided with the opening of a warp rift in the heart of the Metallica system. In those dark days that followed, mankind came to know this rift as the Sore, and from it poured even greater threats. Rather than dash themselves against Metallica's rigid system defenses, the Death Guard had employed the rotting death throes of an entire world in a distant system to eat into the flesh of space and time. Like a maggot burrowing through a corpse, their sorcery had chewed open the rift, allowing immense and ancient warships to traverse the passage and lumber forth from the sore. From them came attack craft bearing heretical Astartes, demon engines, and all manner of other corrupted horrors. The Overseer Imperator of the Quarry World, Shyvon, had adapted her Dominus war protocols as soon as the empiric energies of the Sore had been detected. Connected to the world's macrocognitator banks, Shyvon personally managed the overall strategy. The Quarry World was a source of incredible wealth for Metallica, but of far greater value were the technologies employed upon the planet. The world's resources were scattered throughout hyperdense minerals requiring unique mechanisms and refinery processes to extract. Mining engines thought dating back to the system's colonization were relics beyond any price, as were the 2 atomic smelters and the fleets of servo-operated geodelvers. Dominus Shyvon, in an Uspheric communion with their senior magi, formulated a strategy. This 3-phase operation would brutally purge the corrupted elements already on the planet and hold back the worst that the Death Guard threw at them, all the while preparing for the retrieval of the sacred technologies and engine cores. At Garenhive, an uprising of rabid plague cultists were corralled by squadrons of sulfur hounds. They encircled huge mobs of the infected, driving back hundreds of sore-ridden heretics and techno-possessed servitors into flame-lit service tunnels before sealing them inside. Meanwhile, the attempted sabotage of the Prometheum repository by cultists in the dockyards were uncovered by the Sicarian infiltrators of Delta Maniple. The reinforcing cohorts of vanguards and rangers intercepted the cultists' own rear guard and destroyed the insurrectionist control center. The Dominus continued to feed more cohorts of devoted Scutari into the meat grinder of the planet. The evacuation of the irreplaceable and most sacred engines began in earnest, but it was a slow process. The vaunted artifact engines of the Ordinatus released their final incandescent payloads or kept firing their unique energy weapons until the last possible moment, before the singular Leviathans too were marked for retrieval. Hastily requested lifter barges fortified against the atmospheric descent had arrived from Metallica, and into their cavernous holds went these devices of exquisite and ancient design. The careful procedures of supplication and decontamination were carried out as swiftly as was dared. The tech priests were fearful of angering the machine spirits of those being evacuated. Super heavy capacitor ships grazed the atmosphere above the holy site, ionizing the air for miles around and sanctifying the ground with sparks of power. Shyvon surprised her junior tech priests by delegating oversight of these operations to them. She redoubled her efforts to curtail the Death Guard's victories, absorbing ever more sources of data as she orchestrated the global defense. She monitored teleportation flares, redirecting reinforcements to their locations within nanoseconds, and abandoned battles she saw as inconsequential. The evacuation of the planet's prized assets was mostly successful, though there were some tragic losses. At Mordibus Temple, the atomic smelter was destroyed when a rogue mining engine broke into the underforge from below. Far less tragic losses included the surviving cohorts of Scutari and the remaining loyal clans of the labor serfs. They were commanded to maintain their battle protocols until victory or termination, as the lifter barges bore their precious cargo back to Metallica itself. Now we move on to a less well-known Forge World, but still a badass Forge World, the Forge World of Encaldon. The Forge World of Encaldon was a world caught in an unceasing cycle of war, strife, and invasion that completely engulfed it before it was liberated by the forces of the Great Crusade. Founded by a Mechanicum sleep rock during the Age of Strife, it was a world rich in abundant raw mineral resources, as well as the necessary organic compounds for sustaining a biosphere. Encaldon should have been a perfect locale to found a Forge World, but the same stable warp currents that had succeeded in carrying the Mechanicum to the world eventually brought a host of less welcome voyagers. Records of its initial founding remain fragmented, but it seems for certain that alongside the vast works of macro-construction and geoforming that the ancient Mechanicum colonists undertook, conflict and battle were nearly a constant against a whole host of invaders. As a result, the Encaldon Mechanicum, separated by vast distances from Mars, evolved into a distinct and highly warlike faction, and one that seldom united, as individual forge veins often had to look to their own defense and survival. Wave after wave of Xeno invasions spurred on unusual avenues of technological development and the creation of vast fortified cities which dominated and defended the rich mineral seams and algae-rich seas, while hidden forge veins were sunk kilometers beneath the planet's crust. The Forge Fiends also had to adapt to a new method of acquiring additional human stock by raiding the feral populations of the world, which brought echoes of barbarous and savage cultures that began to infect the increasingly schismatic machine cult. Throughout this long and savage history, the Legal Furians formed the principal military force of the Encaldon's ruling Archmagos, known as the Preceptor General. Its titans served as the avatars of her will. No resource was spared in the Titan Legion's maintenance, and wherever possible, due to lulls in the fighting, the expansion of its combat strength became a priority. Their more common nickname, the Tiger Eyes, also stems from this early period as a corruption of the name given to them by the feral tribes of the nearby world of Humardu, to whom the Titans truly were divine and terrible beings, come to reap a sacrifice for the young and strong to serve in the palace of the gods. Unlike some garrisoning Titan legions before the Great Crusade, the Legal Furians did not stand vigil as enforcers of petty empires. They weren't the machine god servants, but rather fought an unceasing war against a host of foes. For centuries, the Legal Furians unleashed their wrath against the invading hordes of orc marauders and the spiteful raids of Eldar corsairs, scavenging Talarian warpacks and the colossal horrors of meteor-wrought cornoplasm infections from the abyssal reef. Such ceaseless conflict took their toll, both on Encaldon itself and the Legal Furians who defended it. Around 50 standard years before the Great Crusade would finally reach Encaldon, after a particularly brutal series of incursions and raids, the Tagmata Omnissium, the feudal order upon which the defense and the military hierarchy of the Forge World of the Mechanicum was based, finally broke down. In the ensuing strife, the Preceptor General of Encaldon was assassinated, and the Forge World split into warring or isolated factions, battling for central control or coordination, laying it open to invasion and the devastation which followed. By the time the Great Crusade's advanced elements reached Encaldon, it was a global battleground, fought over by dozens of different armies, the Mechanicum, Renegades, and Xeno alike, unleashing atomic fire and yet more savage weapons upon each other. During this time, overwhelmed and vastly outnumbered, the Tiger Eyes refused to retreat or retrench, and they shattered its blade on foes uncounted, until it became only a shadow of its former might, and was reduced to defending the last Forge Fiend of its dead regent. After Imperial contact, Mars was determined to bring Encaldon into the fold of the Imperium, but the Great Crusade was at that time engaged in major battles throughout a series of fronts, and much of the Mechanicum's military forces were tied up in ongoing campaigns. It instead fell to the 8th Expeditionary Fleet's frontline force of the Iron Warriors to bear the brunt of the liberation action, with supporting elements from the Legal Mortis and the Martian Scutari and Secutari forces. The resulting campaign proved to be the bloodiest for the Iron Warriors' history to that point, but after 2 Terran years of guerrilla warfare, Encaldon joined the Imperium. In the aftermath, the lost forges and fortress citadels were quickly reclaimed and repaired by the now ruling Imperial-backed Mechanicum faction. Warship squadrons, now permanently based in the Encaldon system, gave the Forge World respite from attack for the first time in its history, and the vast mineral wealth and productive capabilities of the planet were quickly put into action to fuel the ever-expanding Great Crusade. Oaths of loyalty and debts of blood to the Liberators were affirmed, although in this, Mars and the Legal Mortis were judged by the Encaldon Mechanicum to be their saviors, rather than the Iron Warriors who had expended so many Astartes lives in the war. As a key part of repaying their debt, the Legal Furians was quickly reconstituted and rearmed, with the deep Titan forges beneath the planet's surface put to continuous operation to fuel the second birth of the Titan Legion. Traveling beyond Encaldon, the Legal Furians pursued conflict with an aggressive fervor and tempo of battle seldom matched by any other Titan Legion of that period, splitting their forces into demi-legions and striking groups operating alongside numerous Imperial expeditionary fleets and extermination forces. When the War of the Horus Heresy broke out, it was revealed immediately that the Legal Furians had sided with the War Master Horus, as did both the Fabricator General of Mars and the Legal Mortis. It is clear in hindsight that the Legion knew of the planned treachery beforehand, and were a key and willing part of the War Master's early battle plans and deployment from the start, such as the dispatch of the Demi-Legion of the Tiger Eyes to the Paramar Assault Force before blood had yet spilled on Isfahan V. Very quickly, the ancient rituals and ceremonies of the Legion blossomed into a twisted arcana of what would become known as the Dark Mechanicus, though by declaring to Horus's cause, Encaldon fell quickly into a bloody civil war of its own, the absence of its Titan Legion having stripped its new Preceptor General's principal agency of overmatching powers against its rivals. Following the end of the Horus Heresy, when the traitor legions were driven back into the hellish realm of the Eye of Terror, the newly reformed Adeptus Mechanicus deemed that Encaldon's worth as a Forge World and its potential industrial output was worth saving. Since that time, Encaldon has continued to serve as a vital Forge World of the Imperium. However, recently, Encaldon was incriminated in a conspiracy connected to the techno-heretics and worshippers of a prescribed Xeno lore. Eventually, after the Great Rift was created, Encaldon suffered a series of invasions from several thousand-son warbands known as the Cult of Knowledge. During one of these raids, the cult managed to sacrifice the population of the Forge World and bound their soul essence to a weapon known as Encaldon's Cry. When this relic Wormflame pistol is used, it overloads the psyche of the target with anguish and pain. A very valuable STC has also gone missing during one of these raids. Now let's bring it back to a more well-known Forge World, the Forge World of Lucius. Classified as a Super Natura Majoris, the Forge World of Lucius is a vast, hollowed planet whose industrial sprawl carpets its inner surface. In the planet's empty heart burns an immense artificial sun, a fusion mega-reactor that the Lucian tech priests claim to have built, but whose origin may be more mysterious. What makes the powerful Forge World of Lucius so interesting is that it suffered the perils of doctrinal dissent. Long ago, the planet's Forge Star almost was sent into critical overload during the infamous Encaldon Schism. Lucius survived the near catastrophe and has ever since been a blazing beacon of orthodoxy and compliance with the dictates of Mars. Their tech priests have proven to be fierce of faith and dynamic of action. They are truly devoted servants of the Omnissiah. Moreover, the incalculable energy yield of their artificial star ensures that the Lucian Magi stand at the forefront of martial production. Their world has the capacity to fashion many incredible technologies, not least of which is the proprietary alloy Lucian. This remarkable substance is incorporated into the ornate masterwork weapons and bionics, which are granted to the most worthy Scutari and the marshals that lead them. More than this, Lucius-patterned weapons and war engines have all garnered a well-deserved reputation for excellence across the vast swaths of the Imperium, from the radium carbines and the galvanic rifles of Lucius's own Scutari, to the half-mile-long void-ship lance arrays, heavily armored battle tanks, mass-stamped lasguns, and bizarre techno-esoterica. The mark of this Forge World is the byword of quality and efficiency. Amongst the most amazing of Lucius's technologies are the immense god engines of its Titan Legion. Known as the Legal Furian, or more commonly known as Warp Runners, these machines glory in the unique ability to teleport directly into battle. It goes without saying that the sudden appearance of a towering engine of destruction upon the battlefield has won more than one battle in a spectacular fashion, with weaker-willed foes fleeing in panic or dropping dead from terror before the Legal Furian engine so much as opened fire. Yet the Warp Runners are far from Lucius's only proud martial asset. Ever eager to strike out into the galaxy and take from it the natural resources to feed the blessed forges, Lucius macroclads are amongst the swiftest and the most aggressive fielded by any Forge World. Iron Striders and Doomcrawlers surge towards the enemy with ferocious speed, often outrunning the enemy before they realize their peril. The genius and innovation of the tech priest of Lucius was displayed anew when a splinter fleet of High Fleet Leviathan invaded the planet. Dispatching their legal cybernetica and a great host of battle servitors to the planet's outer surface, the tech priest Dominus largely fought their battles from below the planet's crust. By tracking the motions of their servant clades and controlling activities via data tether, they waged their war without risking direct harm. Wherever the Tyranid swarm overcame their servitor armies, the tech priests waited for the xenopredators to devour the meager biological components before sending serval-skull swarms to carry the most vital of the remaining machine parts below the crust of the planet. There they were installed into fresh recruits, and the next wave was sent back into the surface. Though it took months to accomplish, the resulting war of attrition ended in victory. Deprived of biomatter, the Tyranid splinter fleet was forced to feed upon itself to generate replacement brutes, and the Xenos could not keep pace with the recycled machinery parts and the refurbished robots. Now let's talk about another one of my favorite Forge World, the Forge World of Agripina. Agripina is a Forge World scarred by war, its legions forged in conflict's crucible and tempered through the fires of countless hellish battles. Long has this Forge World resisted the hostile attentions of the Dark God's minions, for it stands perilously close to the warp maw known as the Eye of Terror. Once Agripina labored day and night to supply the fortress world of Cadia with munitions for its endless vigil over the Eye of Terror. So integral to the Forge World was this mission that some tech priests had interpreted the hermetic symbols of Agrippina's iconography as representing the Cadian Gate standing supreme over the forces of chaos. Cadia's fall has forced these and countless other assumptions to be rethought. Even before Abaddon's victory during the 13th Black Crusade, Agripina was already a heavily fortified and war-scarred world. Heretic raiding parties struck at the Forge World often, some seeking to plunder its technological secrets, while others hoped to disrupt the planet's crucial supply lines to key worlds throughout the Cadian war zone. Since Cadia's fall, the frequency and severity of these attacks has increased tenfold. Agripina exists in a state of near-constant conflict, fighting wars of both attack and defense as its macroclads seek to drive back the endless tides of foes spilling from the Eye of Terror. Typically dispassionate, the planet's tech priests have taken every opportunity to hone their armies and defenses both, dissecting every data psalm and noospheric inquisition extracted from each battle and employing their learnings with dogmatic determination. Yet the priests of the Omnissiah are not above emotion when pushed. The assaults upon their world by the unclean servants of the Dark Mechanicus, by obliterator cults, warpsmiths, and even loathsome traitor titan legions have instilled in the tech priest of Agrippina a cold and unbending hatred for the worshippers of the dark gods. The priests have perfected countless methods of slaughtering their heretic foes and will fight on against them even upon the collapse of logic and reason. While Agrippina's stoic defenders have refined their protocols of repudiation and dogged resistance, its tech priests have formulated complex strategies of aggressive counter-sieges as well. Huge wedges of sulfur hounds are unleashed upon advancing enemy formations in shockingly brutal and seemingly reckless maneuvers. Smaller units of Skitarii rangers and raiders harry the enemy, while flights of Stratoraptors strike simultaneously, sometimes adding greatly to the Forge World's own casualties. Any surviving Skitarii of the first charge are pulled back into the second wave, and then the procedure repeats. By the time the enemy reaches the guns of the stationary defenders, they are fractured, bloodied, and demoralized, their cohesion ready to fall upon Agrippina's forces. As with many powerful and well-fortified worlds throughout the wider Cadian Gate, Agrippina has become a focal point of not only conflict, but also refugees. It is natural that fleeing imperial citizens and soldiery alike would put aside their prejudices in such desperate times and seek shelter behind the ironclad bulwarks of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Agrippina welcomes all willing to serve the Omnissiah. Many have chosen starvation over what the planet's magi see as logical contributions to the ultimate victory, but countless others have stepped willingly into the Omnissiah's embrace. This influx of raw, organic material have thus far allowed Agrippina to replace losses amongst its labor-clads and the Skitarii cohorts as swiftly as they are inflicted. Whether this will continue to be the case remains to be seen. Now let's talk about the Forge World of Risa. The Forge World of Risa is famed as the cradle from which many plasma-based weapon technology has sprung. It is the originator of such wonders as the Stormblade and the Leman Russ Executioner. Yet for all its magnificence and tech heritage, Risa is a world sorely embattled, caught amidst the storm of Xeno foes. From its forged temples to its colossal dust dunes, its smog-thick skies and acidic rivers to its dense clouds of low-orbital industrial platforms, Risa stands besieged. The greenskins of two vast orc wogs have converged upon the Forge World in their billions, Wog Grax and Wog Rarguts, either of which by themselves possess the sheer strength and weight of numbers and brutish warriors and war machines to completely overwhelm an entire imperial system, and yet they pour down upon Risa in endless waves. Savage greenskin techno-barbarians blast ancient and irreplaceable machineries to scrap, then add insult to injury by scavenging the wreckage in order to fashion ramshackled weapons of their own. Roaring with glee, hordes of orcs surge upon the planet's surface in breakneck races and beat against the defenses of each forge complex like the crashing waves of a bestial storm. For all of this, Risa remains unbowed. If anything, the world's tech priests could be accused of taking an unseemly delight in some aspects of their world's predicament. With the express permission of their world's fabricator general, the Priest of Risa unleashed the most potent weapons in their arsenal upon the invaders, treating each new engagement as a testing ground, and gathering reams of combat data from victory and defeat alike. From macro-Gatling lasers and plasma disintegration cannons to building-sized transdimensional beamers, anti-gravitic minefields, electrovoltic blunderbusses, and countless other martial esoterica, the Priest of Risa unleashed endlessly terrifying weapons against the orc invaders. And of course, this has transformed the planet's surface into a hellish vision of total war. Yet neither the Risans themselves nor their greenskin foes appear perturbed by the nightmare they have created. Nor does Risa fight alone. Colossal titans wade through the wreckage of blasted manufactorums with guns thundering. Regiments of the Catachan Imperial Guardsmen battle their alien foes through the toxic swamps of the Ryzen hinterlands. Through a mass martial might and ever-developing weaponry, the Forge World continues to resist the overwhelming greenskin invasion. Though the battle still shows no end in sight, Risa's commitment to the other war zones remains undiminished, and they seek ever more diverse testing grounds for their protocols and their materials. And then there's the Forge World of Graa, the Crown of Miracles. The armed forces of this Forge World are amongst the most indomitable and downright stubborn to fight in the defense of the Imperium. They are the byword of martial discipline and obediency both, advancing into firestorms with inhuman fearlessness that is as unsettling as it is inspirational. Everything about the armies of this Forge World beseek ironclad control. So hardwired is their logic, it is said that they can even shield themselves from the malignant attentions of the enemy psyker. Prior to entering battle, the ruling tech priests of the Graian military draw upon resilient battle plans and doctrinal subordinates based on disposition logic. These are then disseminated into their foot soldiers with the weight of holy right. So commanded, every Graian warrior knows their role in the wider shape of the battle, and they strive to fulfill it with unswerving determination. There are many eyewitness accounts from other Imperial forces of Graian Skitarii acting more like battle automatons than living, thinking beings. Neither terrifying inhuman enemies nor thunderous incoming fire can halt the warriors of Graa. Indeed, these macroclads have been described as pressing forward onto their own destruction with an almost mindless determination. This tenacity has proven an asset upon many battlefields where the Graian soldiery have crushed their foes under a relentless advance, or waged attrition battles that eventually broke the enemy with the horrors of their cost. And yet this has also proven to be a detriment in battle, where prudent retreat or rapid tactical flexibility would have prevented the wholesale annihilation of Graa's advancing cohort. Of course, such tragic defeats carry little emotional weight with the Forge World's tech priests. Instead, each such disaster is simply analyzed, dissected, and broken down into strategic data which is fed into the predictive models of future conflicts. Graa itself is unusual in that the Forge World is crested by a geometrically perfect ring of space stations known as the Gran Crown. It is within this megastructure that the Forge World's armies reside, and from it they deploy en masse to repel those who would seek to invade the world below. Moreover, the entire vast structure can move under its own power, and even translate into warp space, allowing the armies of Graa to forge out across the galaxy and exploit the resources of distant worlds, though knowledge of this technology is suppressed as much as possible. Travel aboard the Gran Crown is an imperfect process. The megastructure has repeatedly attracted the hostile attention of both warp entities and the ancient Necrons, and entire battles have been fought within its weirdly symmetrical depths to prevent it from being overrun or captured. Yet so great an advantage is this immense battle fortress that the logical value of its use to Graa far outweighs the potential risk of its loss to hostile enemy forces. When the Gran Crown leaves its Forge World, its fabricator temples are stocked with munitions and its holding decks provisioned with thousands of volunteers. Once a suitable resource-rich world has been discovered, the Crown locks into a stationary orbit like a tick. Fleets of industrial harvesters descend, leeching the world of its asset. Should an enemy be foolish enough to attempt to board the Crown, its production subroutine adapts. Hundreds of freshly built Skitarian servitors pour off the production lines every single minute, and servo carts deliver vast quantities of ammunition to their defenders. While the foe continues to be bled, the plunder of their world below continues unabated.
And those are just some of the major Forge Worlds that you're going to find in the Adeptus Mechanicus Codex. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button. Share this with your friends, comment down in the comment section below, and if you want to support the channel, hit us up with a super thanks, or you could support us on Patreon. The link is in the description. Don't forget, we have other YouTube channels where we have a book club, and we also have the Greater Walks on a separate channel now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll talk tomorrow in another deep dive. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.